What if some of the most forbidden inventions in modern history were never meant to make life easier, but to reveal things human eyes were never supposed to see? Not machines of comfort, but machines of exposure. Devices that seem to detect the aura of the dying, the residue of emotion, even signals from realities just beyond our own. And if even one of them truly worked, then how much of our world has been hidden in plain sight? To understand how deep this pattern goes, we have to begin with one of the strangest and most unsettling inventions ever photographed, a machine that may have captured the energy of life itself. Top 1. The Kurian camera. In 1939, inside a modest Soviet laboratory in Krasnodar, Russia, a maintenance technician named Semyon Kurian and his wife Valentina made a discovery that would haunt the edges of science for decades. While repairing high-frequency electrical equipment used in hospitals, Kurian noticed something deeply unusual. When a patient's body came into contact with a high-voltage circuit, without pain or visible harm, it emitted a brief flash of light. Most people would have ignored it. The Kurians did the opposite. They rebuilt the conditions using photographic plates and electrical fields, and what appeared on film was unlike anything they expected. Leaves, insects, and even human fingertips emerged surrounded by glowing halos of colored light, vivid, ethereal, and disturbingly consistent. Kurian believed they had found a way to capture something the naked eye could never see, the living energy field of matter itself. And the deeper they went, the stranger the results became. Under emotional stress, a subject's glow shifted in shape and intensity. When a person was ill, the aura appeared weaker, thinner, as if something vital was fading in real time. But the most famous image was the one that should not have existed at all. A leaf was torn in half, with only one portion placed on the plate, yet the photograph showed the faint outline of the entire leaf, including the missing half. The Kurians repeated the test and reportedly got similar results. They called it the phantom leaf effect. Was it just moisture and ionization, as orthodox scientists claimed? Or had they photographed a hidden layer of reality that lingered even after matter was gone? That question made the camera impossible to ignore. Soviet medical institutes began exploring it as a diagnostic tool, even considering it for early cancer detection. But as interest grew, so did suspicion. The device became linked to parapsychology, mysticism, and spiritual energy, subjects deeply unwelcome in the materialist climate of the time. Funding dried up, access tightened. The most compelling images, including the phantom leaf and the collapsing aura of dying patients, were sealed away. Researchers outside the USSR were denied access to the original equipment. Many photographic plates vanished, and only degraded scans remained. Valentina died in 1972. Semyon followed in 1980. Both faded into obscurity, their work dismissed in public, yet whispered about in private. And that leaves us with a chilling possibility. If the Kurian camera truly captured a field of information surrounding life, then what exactly leaves the body when life ends, and does some part of it remain behind? Top 2. The Tesla Consciousness Lens. In the spring of 1895, inside a cluttered New York laboratory crowded with coils, copper wires, and violent arcs of electricity, Nikola Tesla carried out an experiment that never became part of the public record. By then, he was already famous for alternating current and wireless transmission, but this machine belonged to a far stranger category. Tesla had designed a lens apparatus integrated into a field of high-frequency resonance. Publicly, he referred to it as a vibrational filter. In his private notes, however, he gave it a far more unsettling name, the consciousness lens. His theory was extraordinary. He suspected that human thought was not merely electrical activity inside the brain, but a subtler oscillation, something that might be isolated from the noise of ordinary matter. And if that were true, then consciousness might be detectable even without a body. The device itself was unlike any conventional lens. It was built from bismuth crystal, polarized quartz, and layered metal discs arranged in a spiral, all mounted within a copper frame and placed between two massive Tesla coils. During one of the final tests before the apparatus was dismantled, Tesla adjusted the resonance to 7.83 Hz, a frequency often associated with the Earth's natural electromagnetic background. Then something happened that seems to have shaken even him. According to the fragments of his notes, the air inside the field began to shimmer. Near the center of the lens, he saw a flickering shape, a pulsing blur that hovered for a moment and then vanished. He was alone in the room. No assistant stood nearby. No one should have been there. Yet Tesla wrote that he felt watched. The next day, he reportedly collapsed from what his assistants described as nervous exhaustion. He never announced the experiment publicly, but in later letters he hinted that consciousness might not be created by the brain at all. Perhaps the brain was only a receiver or an amplifier, picking up something that already existed beyond the body. That possibility changes everything. After the incident, Tesla sealed the lens in a steel box and stopped the work entirely. Then after his death in 1943, the FBI seized his papers. Officials later claimed nothing of value had been found, yet witnesses described a separate, unidentified wooden crate being removed and never cataloged again. So what did Tesla actually see through that lens? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion, or the afterimage of a presence with no physical form? Because if he truly glimpsed consciousness without matter, then the mind is not confined to flesh, and the boundaries between life, thought, and whatever lies beyond are far less solid than we have been told. Top 3. The soul-weight balance. On April 10, 1901, inside a dimly lit hospital room in Massachusetts, physician Duncan McDougall prepared an experiment that would blur the line between science and something far more unsettling. His question was simple, but almost unthinkable for the time. If the human soul exists, does it have weight? To find out, he constructed a highly sensitive industrial scale, calibrated down to the smallest measurable changes, and placed a dying tuberculosis patient upon it. The room was sealed, controlled for temperature, airflow, and any external interference. Every variable was accounted for. Then they waited. As the patient took his final breath, something happened that McDougall claimed he could not explain. The needle on the scale flickered, then dropped. The total loss was recorded at 21 grams. Not minutes later, not gradually, but in a sudden shift at the exact moment of death. McDougall repeated the experiment 5 more times over the following months. In 4 of the 6 cases, he observed a similar pattern, a rapid, unaccounted-for decrease in weight occurring within seconds of death. He insisted this was not evaporation, not air displacement, not the release of bodily fluids. The apparatus had been designed specifically to eliminate those possibilities. What he claimed to have observed was something leaving the body. The reaction was immediate and divided. Newspapers sensationalized the results, calling it proof of the soul, while the scientific community responded with skepticism, questioning his sample size, his controls, and the repeatability of the results. But McDougall did not retreat. He argued that regardless of interpretation, he had recorded a measurable anomaly, something physical that demanded explanation. Then he conducted what became his most controversial test. He repeated the experiment on 15 dogs, all under sedation. In every single case, there was no measurable weight loss. To McDougall, this suggested something unique about human consciousness, something that departed at death in a way that animal life did not. Within a year, his funding was withdrawn. His equipment disappeared during a hospital relocation. No major medical journal agreed to publish his full findings. And yet, the idea refused to die. Decades later in the 1980s, a group of German researchers reportedly attempted a similar experiment using modern sensor beds. Their results were never formally published, but accounts suggested momentary fluctuations at the point of death that could not be explained by known physiological processes. Even more chilling was a note discovered in McDougall's recovered papers years later. In one case, the weight drop did not occur at death, but exactly 3 seconds before. The note simply read, "Departure anticipates cessation." So what does that mean? If something measurable leaves the human body at the moment of death, or even before it, where does it go, and what exactly is it that we lose? Top 4. The Spirit Voice Receiver. In 1959, deep in the quiet countryside of Sweden, a filmmaker named Friedrich Jürgensen set out to do something completely ordinary. He brought a tape recorder into a forest clearing to capture the sound of birds. The recording itself seemed uneventful. But hours later, when he replayed the tape, something impossible revealed itself. Beneath the chirping, faint but unmistakable, was a human voice. It spoke in Norwegian. It called his name. Then it whispered, "Fried, can you hear me?" Jurgensen had been alone. No one had spoken. And yet the voice was there, embedded in the recording as if it had always existed just beyond perception. What began as confusion quickly turned into obsession. Jurgensen returned to the forest, leaving long stretches of silence on his tapes, tuning radios between stations where only static should exist. And again the voices appeared. Some were faint, almost indistinguishable from noise. Others were clearer, more direct, sometimes responding to his questions in real time. Male voices, female voices, and then one that shook him completely. He believed he heard his deceased mother speaking to him. The field would later be called electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, but at the time there was no framework to explain what he was experiencing. Only analog machines seemed to capture it. Reel-to-reel tapes, wideband radios, imperfect signals filled with static, almost as if the voices required the chaos to exist. As word spread, other researchers began to investigate. In Germany, psychologist Hans Bender replicated similar results under controlled conditions. In Italy, experiments involving modified vacuum tube radios reportedly captured full sentences, sometimes in languages the researchers themselves did not speak. In one widely discussed test, a voice emerged claiming to be a deceased relative of a participant and answered a deeply personal question with chilling accuracy. Witnesses described sudden drops in temperature, disturbances in equipment, and a sense that something unseen had entered the room. But the more consistent the results became, the more resistance followed. Critics dismissed the phenomenon as pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns in noise. Funding quietly disappeared, labs shut down. In one case, a university project was terminated after recordings repeatedly captured the same message across multiple languages. They are listening. They will close this. Attempts to replicate EVP using modern digital devices often failed. Noise reduction algorithms erased the very signals researchers were trying to capture. Only older, imperfect systems seemed to allow the voices through, suggesting the phenomenon might rely on instability itself. That raises a question that is far more unsettling than any recording. If these voices are not random noise, not hallucination, and not interference, then what exactly is speaking through the static? Are they fragments of the dead, echoes trapped between moments, or something still present, waiting for the right frequency to be heard? Top 5. The biophoton emitter. In the early 1970s, German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp began investigating a phenomenon so faint that most scientists had ignored it entirely. Living cells, he discovered, emitted tiny bursts of light, not heat, not random radiation, but ultra-weak photons that pulsed with surprising order. At first it seemed insignificant, but as Popp refined his instruments using highly sensitive photomultiplier tubes capable of detecting single photons, a pattern began to emerge. These emissions were not chaotic. They followed rhythms, sequences, almost like a form of communication. He called them biophotons, and what they suggested was deeply unsettling. Popp exposed DNA samples to ultraviolet light and observed that instead of simply reacting, the cells responded with controlled emissions, as if they were regulating the signal intentionally. This was not passive biology. It behaved like a system transmitting information. As experiments expanded to human subjects, the results grew even stranger. When individuals were placed within the emitter's field, their biophoton patterns shifted depending on their emotional state. Stress produced irregular, fragmented signals. Calmness generated coherent, harmonic pulses. It was as if emotions themselves were being translated into light. But the most disturbing discovery came during experiments with identical twins. When one twin was stimulated with light in one room, the other twin, miles away, began emitting identical biophoton rhythms at the same time. No physical connection, no known mechanism. Yet the signals mirrored each other perfectly. The emitter evolved into a controlled chamber, dark, magnetically shielded, and isolated from external interference. Participants reported unusual sensations inside it. Some described feelings of presence, others spoke of seeing colors that did not exist or hearing tones with no source. A few entered altered states of awareness, recalling memories they did not consciously remember. researchers began referring to the chamber as the whisper box. Pop proposed that biophotons were not just byproducts of life, but part of a communication system faster and more fundamental than nerve signals. More than that, he suggested they might represent an information field, a layer where consciousness interacts directly with biology. The implications were too disruptive to ignore and too dangerous to accept. His attempts to publish full datasets on remote synchronization were rejected, not for flawed methodology, but because the conclusions challenged foundational assumptions. Funding was cut. Equipment was confiscated under regulatory pretexts. Several devices disappeared entirely. Other researchers who tried to replicate the work reported similar patterns: unexplained interference, sudden equipment failure, incomplete data. Yet the idea persists quietly, circulating in fringe laboratories and theoretical discussions. If Pop was even partially correct, then the human body is not just a biological machine. It is an active transmitter, constantly exchanging information through light we cannot see. And if emotions can become signals, then where exactly are those signals being sent, and who or what might be receiving them? Top 6. The Dimensional Signal Scanner. In 1996, deep beneath the Ural Mountains, inside a repurposed Cold War bunker, a private research team operating under the name Project OID activated a device that was never meant to attract attention. It was built to monitor low-frequency atmospheric anomalies, subsonic tremors, and rare electromagnetic fluctuations associated with the Earth itself. The system combined military-grade radio sensors, cryogenically cooled amplifiers, and directional field emitters, all tuned to detect signals most instruments would ignore. For the first 2 weeks, everything appeared normal. Then on the third week, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the scanner recorded something that did not belong to any known category. The signal lasted less than 4 seconds. At first glance, it resembled an ultra-low frequency oscillation, but its harmonic structure made no sense. It did not match seismic activity, lightning, solar interference, or any atmospheric phenomenon. When the team visualized the waveform, it formed a pattern that looked disturbingly deliberate, a fractal spiral, repeating yet never identical, like a signature that could not be traced back to any known source. They ran the data through every signal library available. Nothing matched. When they attempted to retune the system manually, they detected a second burst, shorter, but even stranger. Embedded within it was a temporal distortion, a delay that reversed itself mid-transmission, as if the signal did not obey linear time. They labeled the anomaly Event 9X. Over the next 4 nights, similar signals appeared, each slightly different, each arriving from a direction that could not be aligned with any known celestial or terrestrial origin. As the team narrowed the angle of detection, they realized something deeply unsettling. The signal did not come from space. It appeared to enter from above and below simultaneously, as if it curved through a folded structure of reality itself. Standard digital receivers failed to capture it entirely. Only the analog components of the original system responded, especially those built with magnetite core transducers. That led researchers to suspect the signal was not just information, but a form of spatial interference, something that could only be detected through resonance rather than direct measurement. By the end of the week, the project's lead scientist, Pavel Morozov, proposed a theory that few were willing to say out loud. These signals were not random. They were probes, unintentional intersections with another layer of existence. In his final log, he wrote a line that would later circulate quietly among those who studied the case. "This is not a message. It is a pressure point. We are the membrane." Then, without warning, everything stopped. The signals vanished. 2 days later, a fire broke out in the facility, officially attributed to an electrical overload, destroying much of the equipment. Authorities arrived, sealed the site, and cited radioactive contamination. The research team was disbanded. Morozov himself disappeared from public view, his death reported shortly after, with no cause listed. Years later, fragments of the signal logs surfaced online. One spectrogram was analyzed using advanced pattern recognition systems and reportedly matched a mathematical structure known as a Calabi-Yau manifold, a shape theorized in string theory to describe hidden dimensions. If that connection is real, then what the scanner detected was not just a signal, but a brief intersection with something beyond our three-dimensional understanding. And if such intersections can occur even accidentally, then how many times has something from another layer of reality brushed against ours without us ever noticing? Top 7. The Psychic Signal Amplifier. In 1993, inside the basement laboratories of Laurentian University in Ontario, Canada, neuroscientist Dr. Michael Persinger was finalizing a device that appeared almost deceptively simple: wires, coils, and a helmet resembling a retro motorcycle shell. But behind its modest appearance was a concept that challenged one of the most fundamental assumptions about the human mind. Persinger called it a neurotheological interface. Others would later refer to it as the God helmet. Its purpose was not to simulate religious experiences, but to isolate and amplify subtle signals within the brain, signals that might point to something beyond ordinary cognition. At the core of the device were solenoids arranged to emit weak, precisely modulated magnetic fields, targeting the temporal lobes, regions associated with emotion, memory, and the sense of presence. When participants wore the helmet, something remarkable began to happen. Many reported the unmistakable feeling that someone else was in the room with them. Not a vague sensation, but a distinct presence, standing just behind them, observing silently. This experience appeared across subjects of different backgrounds, including skeptics, atheists, and individuals with no prior expectations. The presence varied. Some described it as comforting, others as deeply unsettling, but it was always described as aware. As Persinger expanded his experiments, the results became even more difficult to explain. Some participants experienced what they called boundary dissolution, a loss of separation between themselves and their surroundings. Others reported visions, flashes of light, or a state of awareness where thoughts seemed to stop, yet consciousness remained. In a few cases, participants described encountering forms made of light or shadow, standing within inches of them. But what truly disturbed the research team were the synchronicities. In controlled experiments, subjects placed in separate rooms began reporting similar mental images at the same time, without any communication. When one subject was shown an emotionally intense image, another subject, isolated and unaware, displayed corresponding spikes in brain activity. Attempts to block external signals using Faraday cages did not eliminate the effect. Even identical twins placed in separate environments showed synchronized responses under certain conditions. Persinger cautiously proposed that consciousness might not be confined to the brain at all. Instead, it could exist as part of a shared electromagnetic field, with the brain acting as both receiver and transmitter. The helmet, in this sense, was not creating experiences. It was tuning into something that was already there. That idea drew immediate criticism. Some accused Persinger of inducing hallucinations, while others argued he was manipulating vulnerable minds. Yet behind the public skepticism, interest grew in quieter circles. Leaked documents years later suggested that variations of the technology had been explored in military research, adapted into systems capable of influencing emotional states remotely under programs with names like Silent Veil. Though never officially confirmed, such reports raised unsettling possibilities about how far the technology might have gone. Eventually, Persinger's lab lost funding, and the original device was dismantled. He passed away in 2018, maintaining that his work did not prove the existence of external entities, but it did reveal something profound. If the psychic signal amplifier functioned as he believed, then thoughts are not entirely private. They may drift, resonate, and interact within a shared field we do not yet understand. And if that is true, then when someone feels a presence in an empty room, is it really their mind creating it? Or are they briefly tuning into something that was already there, waiting to be noticed? Top 8. The Subconscious Translator. In 2014, a research facility on the outskirts of Kyoto, Japan quietly released a short abstract in a neuroscience journal that at first glance looked completely ordinary. Buried under technical language and dense methodology was a phrase that caught the attention of a few careful readers: visual reconstruction of subconscious imagery during REM states. Behind that clinical wording was a machine with an astonishing purpose. It was designed to read dreams. The system, later referred to as the subconscious translator, combined real-time fMRI scanning with machine learning algorithms, trained to associate patterns of neural activity with specific visual forms. Volunteers were shown thousands of images while their brains were monitored, allowing the system to learn how certain thoughts appeared in measurable neurological patterns. Once the model was refined, researchers moved to the next stage. They let the subjects fall asleep. What happened next crossed a line that many people had assumed would remain science fiction for decades. As the volunteers entered REM sleep, their brain activity was scanned continuously, and the system began generating crude visual reconstructions based entirely on live neural data. The first outputs were rough and unstable, but unmistakably real. A hallway, a face, a hand, a forest fading in and out of mist. These were not random graphics. They corresponded to what the dreamers later described after waking. In one case, a subject dreamed of an unfamiliar city, and the machine rendered a skyline that had not been included in the image set used to train the system. That detail alone was disturbing enough, but it was only the beginning. As the experiments continued, the anomalies grew harder to dismiss. Subjects began reporting dreams that involved languages they did not speak, symbols they could not explain, and experiences that felt less like dreams than observation from outside the body. One participant described standing in a room filled with figures made of glass and smoke communicating without words. The system rendered shifting luminous forms that researchers claimed were not part of the AI's training history. Another subject dreamed of walking down a staircase spiraling into a blue void, and the generated reconstruction matched her spoken description before she had even verbalized it. Then came the most unsettling report of all. One volunteer, after reviewing archive reconstructions, insisted that a city he saw in someone else's data had appeared before he ever dreamed it himself, as if the dream space was not entirely private, but shared. Within 6 months, the project was discontinued. Officially, the explanation centered on ethical concerns surrounding memory interference and mental privacy. Unofficially, the atmosphere inside the lab had changed. According to reports from an assistant connected to the project, several researchers began experiencing synchronized dreams involving the same image. A tower standing alone in an empty field, with something at the top watching them. The lead researcher withdrew from public discussion and removed his name from the final publication. Full outputs from the machine were never released. Rumors persisted that the final dataset was transferred to a government-linked program focused on defense-related brain interface technology. The Kyoto lab closed and the trail went cold. If the subconscious translator truly did more than decode dreams, then its real discovery may have been far more disturbing. It may have revealed that the dream world is not only a private theater of memory and imagination, but a navigable terrain where minds intersect. A place where images arrive before we create them, where symbols exist before we understand them, and where something older than thought may already be waiting for us each night. If that is true, then when we fall asleep, are we really entering our own mind or stepping into a shared landscape we were never meant to remember? Top 9. The Emotion Field Recorder. In 1987, a research unit affiliated with the British Society for Psychical Research was called to investigate a small, abandoned farmhouse in North Yorkshire. Locals had reported something difficult to describe and even harder to ignore. Anyone who entered certain rooms, especially a narrow hallway lined with broken picture frames, experienced sudden waves of dread, vertigo, and overwhelming sadness. One visitor collapsed upon entry, insisting he heard a child screaming behind the walls. Instead of dismissing the case as folklore, the team brought with them a specialized instrument developed by an experimental physics group at Cambridge. It was known as the Emotion Field Recorder, a device designed to detect fluctuations in environmental electromagnetic fields associated with intense human emotion. Unlike conventional detectors, this machine used layered sensor arrays combined with phase-sensitive amplifiers to identify what researchers called residual affective imprints. The idea was unsettling. Emotional events, especially traumatic ones, might leave behind measurable traces embedded within physical space. The team placed sensors throughout the farmhouse and monitored the environment continuously. For the first 3 days, nothing unusual occurred. Then at exactly 2:46 a.m. on the fourth night, The recorder registered a sudden spike in field coherence concentrated along the hallway. At the same moment, temperatures dropped, analog instruments began to distort, and a camera positioned at the far end of the corridor captured a brief pulse of light, circular, motionless, hovering for 2 full seconds before disappearing. But the equipment was not the only thing reacting. Two researchers reported an overwhelming sensation of being watched, followed by vivid mental images that did not feel like memories of their own. One described standing in the same hallway decades earlier, witnessing a child fall down the staircase in slow motion. Disturbed by the consistency of the reports, the team consulted local historical records. What they found aligned perfectly with the data. In 1932, a young boy had died in that exact location after falling from the upper landing. The recorded anomaly matched not only the place, but the time pattern. Every night at precisely 2:46 a.m., the same section of the hallway produced nearly identical readings, forming a repeating loop in the field data. When visualized, the anomaly appeared as a spiraling pattern anchored to the site of the incident, as if the event itself had been imprinted into the structure of the environment. The team proposed a theory that challenged conventional understanding. Extreme emotional experiences might not simply fade into memory. Instead, they could become embedded into the fabric of space, forming what they described as a resonant emotional lattice. Under certain conditions, this lattice could reactivate, causing new individuals to experience fragments of the original event. Not a ghost in the traditional sense, but a replay, an echo encoded into reality itself. News of the findings spread quickly, attracting attention far beyond academic circles. Within weeks, the farmhouse was purchased by a private entity with undisclosed backing. The investigation was terminated, and the device was confiscated during an unscheduled inspection. Official statements dismissed the results as non-reproducible, yet two members of the original team reportedly built a simplified version of the recorder and tested it in other locations known for violent history. They found similar patterns, though weaker. In one underground cell in Edinburgh, the readings became so intense that the device malfunctioned catastrophically. The collected data was never released. If the emotion field recorder functioned as described, then human experience does not vanish when a moment ends. It lingers, embedded in walls, in air, in places we walk through without ever realizing what remains there. And if emotions can imprint themselves onto space, then how many places around us are quietly replaying events we cannot see, waiting for someone sensitive enough or equipped enough to feel them again? Top 10. The Cross-Reality Oscillator. In 2009, deep within a privately funded research facility hidden in the Nevada desert, a team of physicists and defense engineers assembled a machine that would later disappear from all official records. Internally, the project was known as the Halcyon Array, but those who worked closest to it used a far more direct name, the Cross-Reality Oscillator. The device stood nearly 3 meters tall, built from interlocking magnetic coils, rotating gyroscopic rings, and a central spherical chamber suspended within a complex electromagnetic framework. Its purpose was not to open a portal in the traditional sense, but to generate overlapping resonance fields, frequencies layered so precisely that they might destabilize the boundaries between adjacent states of reality. During its third test, the oscillator was activated for exactly 2 minutes and 34 seconds. At first, the instruments recorded what the team had hoped for: anomalies in vacuum fluctuation, irregular particle behavior, subtle shifts in local gravitational readings. But then the experiment crossed into something no one had prepared for. Inside the chamber, a sealed mannequin surrounded by passive sensors moved. Its arm, previously resting at its side, was later found raised, frozen mid-motion in the recorded footage. A fracture appeared along the back wall of the chamber, not a break caused by force, but something stranger, as if the concrete had briefly folded and then returned to its original state. What followed extended beyond the machine itself. One researcher monitoring the test began screaming, claiming he saw his own reflection blink independently from his body. The device was shut down immediately, but the effects did not stop. In the days that followed, multiple team members reported memory disturbances. One recalled living through an entire day that no one else remembered. Another woke to find objects in her home rearranged in reverse order, a change later confirmed by surveillance footage that showed no one entering or leaving. The most detailed account came from the project's systems architect, who described experiencing two realities at once during the test. In one, she remained in the control room. In the other, she stood in a dim metallic corridor leading to a vast chamber containing a version of the oscillator that appeared active, alive with shifting light, surrounded by figures she could not identify. Within a week, the facility was evacuated. The official explanation cited structural instability caused by electromagnetic interference, yet satellite images later showed the site completely demolished. No follow-up studies were published. The team dispersed into private sector roles, and the lead architect vanished from public view. Leaked schematics revealed one final detail that only deepened the mystery. The resonance frequencies used in the oscillator corresponded to theoretical vibration patterns described in advanced models of hidden spatial dimensions. If the device functioned even briefly as intended, then it did not tear open reality. It shifted between layers of it. And if that shift was real, then our universe may not be a single continuous space, but one layer among many, separated only by frequencies we do not yet understand. The 10 devices you have just seen are not isolated curiosities scattered across history. They form a pattern, one that repeats with unsettling consistency. Each machine, in its own way, attempted to reveal something beyond the limits of ordinary perception. Whether it was the energy surrounding life, the presence of consciousness without a body, or signals from dimensions we cannot see. And each time, the result was the same: silence, suppression, disappearance, data sealed, equipment confiscated, researchers discredited or removed from public view. So the question is no longer whether these inventions existed. The question is why they were all pushed into the shadows. If even one of them worked as described, then our understanding of reality is incomplete. Consciousness may not be confined to the brain, emotion may not disappear when a moment ends, and the boundaries of our world may not be as solid as we believe. What would happen if these technologies were openly studied, shared, and understood? And more importantly, what are we not supposed to see? If you found this as unsettling as it is fascinating, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because the deeper we go, the more the unseen begins to look back.